Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Monday, the 14th of March, 2022, and you've tuned into the off-season edition of our Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Just a few weeks left, and then it'll be the on-season. These have become much more frequent. In today's update, Super La Niña, possible. What the heck is that? I'll explain. We also are looking at a very warm western Atlantic, and, of course, the lower 48 weather segment. At least this week, a little bit of severe weather coming up, just a little bit. We'll take a look at that and some tweets from people at Storm 2K, what they're talking about there. Busy schedule again here on the Monday update for you. So let's get started. First, a look at the global temperature map here, the anomalies map from the NOAA Coral Reef Watch. It used to be called the NOAA NESDIS, but whatever. It's a nice map showing the temperature anomalies or departures from average. In this area right through here, the Central Pacific, colder. The La Niña holding on, colder than average there. A little bit of a warm-up in the extreme eastern Pacific in the Niña 1-2 areas. But the Atlantic still generally running warmer than average pretty much everywhere, especially the western Atlantic. I'll show you a close-up of this as we get further along in the discussion. The SOI, positive. Still quite positive here. Dipped a little bit in recent days, then it steadied and now on its way back up. These numbers pretty solid. The 30-day at 9.17, the 90-day a healthy 8.12, and the contributor for today is 12. What does that mean? Why does it matter? Well, typically, when the SOI is positive like we're seeing, the air pressure is lower in the western Pacific than it is in the eastern Pacific, and the net flow of air can be a pretty brisk east to west, and your trades are nice and strong through here, and you get that La Niña setup. That's a oversimplistic way to look at it, but that's generally how the SOI works. The Southern Oscillation Index, when it's positive like it is, you get these La Niñas, and that's what we're seeing. The evidence is there. We've seen it. I mean, look, this data goes back. It's charted, it's graphed, it's all there. Pretty remarkable here from the Queensland government in Australia. They keep an eye on this kind of stuff. You've seen the flooding that's been going on there in parts of Australia recently, some severe flooding, actually. And so they have a huge interest in what's going on with the weather for agricultural necessities, things like that. And they've been on top of this for a long time. The SOI is one of the longer-running metrics that we have used as a species to track the weather. And as it relates to what's going on with global sea surface temperatures, I'm telling you, it is such a good literal barometer, because it is measuring air pressure, that shows us that we're in this La Niña state. And added to that, it looks like we're here to stay. This tweet here from Tyler Stanfield, multi-year La Niña becoming increasingly likely. And we can look at that positive SOI. That shows us right there. Regarding the current trends favoring La Niña strengthening, not weakening. The last multi-year event was 98 through 01, and the only event since 1950 that saw a La Niña strengthen in its third year was 1975. And that is very important, because if this La Niña does indeed strengthen, meaning that these anomalies get colder over time, over the next several months, the last time that happened, this is the third one in a row, La Niña 2020, La Niña 2021. Now looks like we could have a La Niña 2022, and if it strengthens, first time that's happened since 75. What's the big difference between now and 75, weather-wise? Well, there's a lot of things, but in the oceans, the Atlantic was not in a warm phase of the AMO, the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. So we could be looking at a setup with a strengthening third-year La Niña and a warm Atlantic. Two combinations there that we have not seen in modern history. So that's interesting, you know? An anomaly on top of an anomaly. Really, I'm serious. This could be very interesting as we go forward. Now, this nice little graph here that Tyler references in this tweet from Alex over at Cyclonic Weather, a nice diagram showing us the trades. Basically, these purples that you see in here that I'm highlighting, very strong trade winds across this longitudinal zone. All right? When, from around now starting now through about the 18th of March and then probably going beyond that. But we've had trades very strong. That's what all these blues are, abnormally strong easterly trades going back to February. So the Pacific has cooled. Interestingly enough, too, this is 60 degrees west longitude on this particular diagram, and we go back to February, and we had some pretty good trades in the Atlantic basin. But look right here, coming up, the trades start to weaken a little bit. That's what the oranges and reds show, and even in some cases a reversal where you have a westerly wind burst. Maybe the Atlantic starts to warm a little bit going forward, while the Pacific markedly cools, or at least has the potential to cool off. So a very interesting setup going forward, as noted by some pretty on top of it, I would say experts. These gentlemen know what they're talking about. So an interesting set of tweets there. Also, related to this, over at Storm 2K, one of the members here, King Arabian, down in Honolulu. Great place. I've been there once, back for Hurricane Lane in 2018. And this is what's interesting, and this is where our little headline grabbing, attention-seeking, whatever. And it's true, I didn't want to just lure you in. It wasn't clickbait. This is interesting. Look, for the soon-to-be third-year La Niña, this is truly impressive. Talking about this diagram here, because it's usually the first and second-year La Niña events where the atmosphere behaves like this, says King Arabian. If they don't stop, meaning these trades here and how strong they are, the intensity and duration of these trade bursts might mean a strong or super La Niña when the effects at the subsurface are realized. This is not hyperbole. People just saying stuff to get attention. The data is there. This particular graph here, this diagram, shows what's coming. And that is a heck of a trade burst. And what happens is that wind blowing across the ocean that hard literally displaces it just enough that you upwell colder water from below, strengthening that La Niña, because the colder water below is colder, right? And you bring that to the surface, we call that upwelling, and it could strengthen to super La Niña threshold. I didn't look up exactly what that means. What number do we have to reach for a cold anomaly? I would imagine probably -2, maybe -2.5 Celsius at the subsurface, at the surface, whatever, to reach super La Niña. But a strong to super La Niña, where it is truly an exceptional event, something that we haven't seen since the 70s. Wow. With the warm Atlantic, I'm telling you, this has got my attention, because we could be looking at some uncharted territory here. Kind of rare. It really is. And then it brings me to Ben Knoll tweeting about this stuff. He's watching it as well. Of course he is. Looking ahead to the hurricane season, he says, a few things that have my attention. We just talked about this, the La Niña-like pattern and the warm Atlantic. Tropical forcing over Africa, Indian Ocean. Where have we seen that? I'll tell you. Last couple of years, 2020, 2021. Above normal rainfall in the main development region, and the higher heights. In other words, a large bubble of air, more so than normal, over northeast Canada. So let's look at these graphics individually. A conglomeration or amalgamation, whatever you want to call it, of a lot of these different models here. You see what all these different ones? There's the La Niña look in the Pacific, the warm Atlantic overall. That in and of itself should give you a fairly active Atlantic hurricane season that does not suggest a suppressed season. You can almost take that to the bank. Busy season, or how busy it's going to be, we'll have to wait and see, but this does not suggest an inactive season. That's the first clue. Next thing is this tropical forcing. This is so important. Green is all this rising air over Indian Ocean and Africa. That generates these tropical waves that come off. They move westward. Yes, there's some sinking air over the Atlantic basin, but you get these pockets, especially close to the coast over here. And when you get these MJO events, or these Kelvin wave passages, which are too small for the climate models to see, then you get these periods where these tropical waves come off. They are robust. They may struggle in this area, but then they blossom over here, and that's where we live, and that could be problematic. So there could be a stable MDR even though, as Ben says, the rainfall probabilities look like they're pretty high in the MDR, so that's interesting. This is based on the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, the NMME. So we'll see. There's some couple of discrepancies. You can't have a bunch of warm water all up in the subtropics up here and have a wet MDR. I guess you could. If Africa is spitting out some crazy strong tropical waves, maybe it overrides that. But there's a lot of signaling here for a strong hurricane season ahead. These anomalies over here, precipitation anomalies in the western part of the basin, that's interesting. Again, this is where people live. All right? And you don't look at this and say this is exactly what's going to happen. This is like looking ahead at the general overall thought process of the modeling from February and March. This will run again in April and in May. And, it gets refined, and we'll see. But it's the same kind of stuff we saw the last couple of years. And in some cases, the strongest signal that we've seen in a long, long time, even more so than 2020, which gave us 30 named storms. Hopefully the Atlantic Basin won't be quite as warm as it was in 2020, and so we may have less numbers overall. I think that would be a reasonable guess. But, you can still have enough impact from what you do have that it could be a very busy season. The next part of the equation that Ben talked about was these higher heights over Canada. The modeling showing that out towards, this is August of 2022. The next one will come out for September next month. But generally, higher heights over the northeast part of North America, the northwest Atlantic Basin, whichever way you want to look at it. Why is this important? If you have stronger ridging here, then your systems come off and they're not as likely to recurve. They'd have to curve early to catch that trough. Once they get west or they blossom late, they're already trapped. And they have to hit land, whether it's Central America, the Caribbean, the islands of the Caribbean, or maybe they get stuck in the Gulf or head towards Florida. This is a pattern that we have to pay attention to. All right, so the anomalies, this is a nice zoomed in version of this guy right here. Let's zoom in. So here we are. Look at this. The western Atlantic Basin here, very warm compared to average, all around Florida. The Gulf of Mexico, the western Gulf, the shelf waters. Look, this will all warm up in no time as we get especially through April and May. But these are anomalies. These are your departures from average. And there's far more yellows, oranges, and reds, dark orange, light red, whatever, than there are blues by a vast majority. See, you can clearly see that. And, the scale here is what you need to look at. Very warm compared to where it should be, especially in the western basin here. And we're getting closer. I mean, that's, less than 60 days out, and we're going to have to start watching this area right through here for potential development. It's just the way it goes, especially these past several years. I can't even remember how many years now in a row we've had development in May. It's just year after year, and that's coming, less than 60 days out. All right, actual temperatures. Anybody on spring break? Well, if you are and you're down along the coast of Florida and elsewhere, water is still a little chilly unless you get down to extreme South Florida. 26 Celsius made it up to the Keys and right off Miami and West Palm, close to it anyway. Everywhere else a little chillier. The shelf water takes a little longer to warm up. It's a little farther to the north, so that makes sense. But the Gulf is responding to the increasing sun angle and that extra hour of daylight that we just got, wink, wink, yesterday. A few of you you'll get it. I mean, we don't really get extra daylight. Just kidding. No, I'm not kidding that whatever. You get the idea. It's a joke. A dad joke that didn't work. But yes, the Gulf is warming because there is extra daylight because the Earth and its rotation and the axis change and all that. We're just gaining daylight in the northern hemisphere every single day. Has nothing to do with daylight saving time. Whatever. I'll just move on. Off the Atlantic, nice little area of 25 Celsius that has nosed its way up in the Gulf Stream region off the southeast. But doesn't do us any favors if you want a vacation. Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Hatteras, whatever. Yeah, still too chilly there. And just forget about it. From Nag's Head all the way up to Cape Cod, you freeze your you-know-what's off. All of them. All your parts. Done. It's not going to work. I don't care if you have a wetsuit or whatever. I'm not getting in. But water temperatures are increasing, and at least once we get to the summer months, it'll be nice and toasty. I like that gradient, though. That's always cool to see there. The temperature gradient getting steeper because the waters are warming, and the shelf water is holding on for dear life, especially after that cold wave, cold snap that we just had. All right, let's get out of the tropics and look at lower 48 weather. Fortunately, a fairly calm map, as evidenced by the lack of overall watches and warnings for today. A few areas of note in the areas around the lakes here. Wisconsin, northern Michigan, a little bit of inclement weather in the Pacific Northwest, some fire weather type conditions, windy conditions in parts of West Texas, and then there's a few river flood warnings in and about. Please do remember, this is a great resource. You can click anywhere on this map. For example, just somewhere in Mississippi, if it'll load for me, maybe my internet. There we go. You click anywhere on the map, as I was trying to say, and it gives you headlines, a lot of times with an infographic from the local WFO or Weather Forecast Office, and then a zoomed-in version of that big map, and it shows you these different areas. And if you know your county, and hopefully you know your city, I mean, come on, you can click on that or just the actual advisories here, and you get all this information, and it's free. People oftentimes ask me, hey man, what weather app do you use? I honestly don't use one. I bookmark my local weather service office on my phone, pin it to the home screen on my iPhone. I'm sure Android has something similar, and that's my weather app. I mean, what else do I need? There's no ads. I don't have to worry about in-app purchases or anything like that. It's just there. I mean, why not? I don't know. I mean, that's just me. I'm old school. All right, let's move along. GFS over the next week or so, just kind of scooch this out. A little bit of a severe weather threat over the next couple of days that manifests itself in eastern Texas. I'll show you that in more detail in just a moment. But generally what we call zonal flow, meaning that the flow is like this instead of longitudinal like that. It is more along the lines of Pacific to Atlantic instead of out of Canada to Florida. And I like zonal flow a lot better, and you should too. It means warmer air, basically. Maybe you like winter. Winter's fun for a little while. But yeah, this kind of pattern will favor generally fast-moving storms, but the threat of severe weather along the way. This is around day 5, and then there's day 6, day 7 right there. Actually, around day 7 and beyond, we could have a heck of a plains storm setting up, coming out of the front range into the plains, so we'll take a look at that. Let's just go back real quick. So again, a little bit of a severe threat today. I'll show you that in just a moment. Possibility of some big hail. We'll zoom in on that in a minute from the Storm Prediction Center. But overall, not the worst pattern possible, leaving the middle part of March here, headed towards the last third of the month. March can be brutal, and that storm we just had, that was pretty impactful. Blew part of my fence over. My neighbors helped me fix it, thank you very much. So, it could be worse. All right, park your cars, if you live in this area, in the garage or under a shelter or whatever. Why? The hail threat right there, that black hatched area, significant impacts from hail. That is no joke. Several of our patrons, our supporters, are in the catastrophe claims, hail business, whatever, and they watch this stuff. You know who I'm talking about if you're watching. This should have your attention down there. And it's important because, 2-inch hail, that's about yay big. That'll mess up your car. So if you're in that area, pay attention, get the word out to people. Severe weather, it's not just the tornadoes. Those get the headlines, but those big hailstones can cause a lot of problems. And that's a pretty big risk today when they put that little black area. Yikes. So just be careful of that. The tornado threat, 5%, that'd get my attention. And the wind threat, 15% for some straight line wind. So pay attention to that for today, seriously, especially in, again, that hail area in eastern Texas there. Pretty significant. If you're flying into Dallas, depending on where you're coming from, you got to go through some of that. Well, have fun with that. Glad I'm not flying into Dallas today. Tomorrow, a little bit of a severe threat, very limited up here in parts of, straddling Idaho and Washington, Oregon. And then a marginal threat down here along the Gulf Coast, including parts of the peninsula of Florida, as a weak low pressure area traverses across this area of the Gulf out into the Atlantic. Nothing too major, luckily. And then day 3, general thunderstorm activity across the southeast, including the peninsula of Florida. So if you're spring breaking, especially in Florida, the Sunshine State, it might not be so sunshiny as the severe threat. Limited, but it still could create some storminess. So, just be aware of this stuff. That's part of what we do in the off-season discussion. Just giving you my point of view on things. This is stuff I would look at, so I figure I'll share it with you. So just keep your eyes on it. Once we get into the latter parts of March through April and May, the severe threat is going to ramp up, and with that very warm Gulf compared to average, I fully suspect that Tornado Alley out here, the traditional Tornado Alley area, is going to be quite busy during the height of severe weather season. And as I have mentioned a few times already, we will be out there setting up some of our stuff, doing something different than what you're used to seeing from the traditional storm chasing crowd. More on that later. Now, I told you about this interesting little surprise that I had for you related to Hurricane Laura. Remember, way back in 2020, we had Laura, a terrifying hurricane headed for southwest Louisiana, Cameron, Calcasieu parishes, etc. Devastating event. We had a bunch of cameras, a bunch of technology set up out there. One of those camera units was set up close to the Carless area, as it's called, north of Hackberry, right along 27 in a little community there near Shoepick Bayou. And what did that camera look like? Well, the view that it had, let's get rid of me, if it'll let me. This is what the camera was showing. This is its view. This is the evening of August 26, 2020. This is the bridge. That's 27 right there. And again, this is before Laura came in. I'm just scrolling through for you. It came in, created a lot of havoc, knocked out the power, and just got all crazy. All right. So a little bit afterwards, different teams go out and they do surveys. And it turns out Matt, one of our colleagues and supporters from the Denver area, he and I were working on some stuff related to research that we're doing, and we were trying to solve some mysteries and just go over the data. There's so much to go over. It's going to take us years. It's a good thing. I'd rather have the data, and it takes a long time to parse it, than not have it at all. But we found something really neat. Matt did, and he said, "Oh, dude, you got to see this. Google Street View, an amazing thing. And if you do this, and you can do it yourself, you look at this, there's an old picture, but then you move over on the other side of the bridge, and there's a newer picture." I was like, well, that's interesting. And Matt said, check it out. Look at the date, August 2020. Clearly early in the morning, it's brightly lit. And of course, on Google Street View, it's basically a 360 camera. This is from Auburn University. Their Structural Extreme Events Reconnaissance, or STEER. Pretty cool. That's not part of the top. That's a graphic. They don't drive around with that on there. That'd be cool if they did. This is a graphic that's superimposed. There's their super awesome shadow of the camera. The shadow's cool and the camera's cool. Look, they got gas. I don't know what's in the box. Water. A little generator back there. Looks like Gatorades, maybe. And is that one of those Yeti coolers? Maybe. Who knows? This is more than likely August 28th. This is my guess. Not the day after, the 27th. Could have been, but I doubt it. So I think it's the 28th. This person or persons, I don't know who this was, went down and they did a survey right after Laura. Now I'm going to go backwards here because the way they were traveling, they were going forward. Whatever, the camera's 360. You know that, right? You know Google Street View. So this is that area, Shoepick Bayou. And there's the blue house that was in our shot. That's it right there. Sadly, it's in the water. It got blown off into the water. And our camera was sitting over here somewhere. And so Matt was looking at this, and he was like, "Oh, dude, you got to check this out." And I was like, "What?" And he says, told me what to do, how to find it. Sure enough, if we look over here, there's a pickup truck next to the pole, and that right there is our camera. Yep, isn't that neat? I just thought it was neat. It's not the biggest, you're probably like, oh, that's a letdown. It's cool. That'll be there forever. You know, the reconnaissance thing saw our camera after the event. So there's no telling, especially these days, how many of these have been seen from all these deployments that we've ever done. So it's almost like a geocache or a Where's Waldo or whatever. You know, totally by accident, almost 1.5 years, whatever later, Matt accidentally found that. And that's it. That's our camera sitting there. Actually, sometime after that picture was taken, the owner of the property over there took that camera down, and some other people told us that they had gotten it. They didn't steal it. They were just taking it down. They really weren't sure whose it was. I'm not sure if that had a label on it or not. They do now, identify it and whatever. We got it back. It was no big deal. But this is probably the morning of the 28th, would be my guess. Because we went by there on the 29th, and we couldn't find the camera, and we were missing our weather station. That's a whole other story. That's why Matt and I were looking over all this. But the people had gotten the camera for us, but not the weather station. We think it blew into the bayou. Again, that's a whole other story. But isn't that neat? There's our camera right there, sitting on the pole at Shoepick Bayou. The Silent Century. Our good friend Kerry, may he rest in peace, coined that term, the Silent Century. All right. Connect with us. Check us out. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on Patreon, crowdfunded on Patreon. Hey, look, if you hadn't, made the choice to jump over the Patreon yet, this year, the stuff we are rolling, it just keeps getting better and better. We're going to have live wind data. I mean, literally instant wind data coming off our anemometer systems every second. More pressure sensors, more cameras, more GoPro systems. It's just elevated because people are getting behind it. That's the power of crowdfunding. It's like a cooperative. It's amazing. You point your phone at the QR code or just go to patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. Get the Patreon app on your smartphone or your computer and search Hurricane Track on there. Jump on board. We got Discord going on. I mean, it is just amazing. Like, I am blown away by the support. Not just the funding. The funding pays for everything, but the crowdsourcing of ideas, meeting people in the field. I mean, it's just an amazing world we live in. There's a lot of negatives in the world, but this is one of the true positives, and it's my job to tell you about it, so I'm telling you about it. But yep, we're on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and the notification button or whatever they tell you to do. Do it so we get the algorithms, the YouTube, to notice us so we can grow this even more. The more people, the better. Share what we're doing. All right, let's get back to the title screen, and let me exit this puppy and get out of here and send you on your way. I think that's about it for the week. Looking ahead to next week and beyond, we got spring break coming up for my kids, so there's going to be about a week that I do take some time off. I'll be gone, but that's coming up. I'll talk about that next week. Between now and then, at least it looks like a fairly tranquil weather pattern. Nothing major, at least, so there's that. All right. Thanks for tuning in, as always. I do appreciate it more than you'll ever know. I'm serious. It's great to have you watching. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with you again next week.